everybody, and welcome to WTF Hammer Underworlds. I wanted to start this video off by showing you the end product of how all of my cards are organized. And you might look at this stack and wonder why I have so many cards. And no, I didn't buy the game 4 times. What I actually did is I bought the game once. I bought all the products. I bought all the war bands and the universal cards that came with those. I bought all the additional card packs. I bought the boards. So I spent a ton of money in this game. I've bought every product that came out since season 1, and all that is actually consolidated in these 3 boxes. So I have one box that contains all of my Shadespire season 1 universal cards, so only my universal cards are in that box. This contains all of my season 2 Night Vault universal cards, and this contains all of my season 3 Beastgrave universal cards, and that box is almost complete. I think there's just one more expansion coming out September 2020. And then, unless there's some kind of surprise card pack, season 3 will be finished at that point. Now, all these other boxes here just represent copies of cards that I've made. So one of the beefs, one of the grievances I guess I've had with this game when I first bought it is when this game first came out, I bought 6 warbands all at once. I bought the main game, I bought the first 4 warbands that were released, which put me up to almost $200. And after putting it all together and figuring out how the game works, I realized that I can't even play with anybody unless they also invest $200 some odd, which I thought was really annoying. For a moment I was considering just selling the game and cutting my losses. But then I thought, oh, well, if I just made some copies of these cards, then I'd be able to play with other people who wouldn't be forced to make that investment, and then I'd be able to get some house games going on. So what I did is that I didn't multiply any of the faction-specific cards because I didn't feel it was necessary. I figure if I'm playing Chosen Axes, for example, whoever I'm playing with can just choose another warband. It's not worth me multiplying 20 some odd warbands just so that we can potentially play the same one at the same time. But what I did do is I made 3 additional copies of all the universal cards, which is what you can see back here. These are my additional copies of season 1. So this is player 2 for season 1 cards, player 3, player 4, and it just sort of continues this way. So basically, if ever I'm playing a game, I will play with the main cards, which I even marked with a little 1. I might have a friend playing with the player 2 cards. So obviously season 1 rotated out, so they would just be using the Night Vault and the Beastgrave universal cards when building decks. And similarly, if I have a 3rd player, they can play with the 3rd set. If I have a 4th player, they can play with the 4th set of cards. Now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to zoom in on these boxes a little bit just to show you how I've actually organized them. So I'll start with my main set. And there's nothing exceptional here. I just put a bit of box art. So I have a big universal card symbol, and I just printed out a little Shadespire symbol just so it becomes easier to recognize that season 1 stack. And on the back here, I also put the FAR list that relates to season 1. So you have the Forsaken list, which applies to Relic mode, as well as Championship mode, and then you have all the restricted cards. So if I wanted to go back and play a season 1-2 game, I could just use my season 1 and 2 universal cards, build a deck that way, use the 5 card restriction that existed back then, and then use this FAR list, as well as the FAR list that is on the Night Vault box, which is also up to date. And whenever new updates come out, I just reprint out this label and stick it to the boxes. Now, as far as what's inside the box, well, I organize them in such a way that makes it easy for me to find cards. So I usually just use deck builders, like Underworld's deckers, to build my decks. And then when it comes to assemble the deck, well, I just pull up the deck list on my cell phone and then I pull it out of these boxes. So I've separated them by objective cards, gambit cards. For the season 2 and 3, I also put little spells in there just because spells are introduced in season 2. And then you have the upgrade cards. Then I basically alphabetize them. I didn't do an amazing job alphabetizing them, like all the S's are together. I didn't like separate the SAs from the SEs or whatever, but it just makes it easier for me to find the cards. I found when I had them organized in a way where they weren't alphabetized, it would just take me forever to find anything. It would take me honestly like 25 minutes to assemble a deck, whereas now that they're alphabetized, it takes me 5 minutes. The only other thing worth noting as far as how I organize cards is cards that are restricted, and I'll just see if I can find an example here. So cards that are restricted, like Change of Tactics, I just put a little sticker on top of them, and that way if I happen to be siphoning through the cards, it's easy for me to count how many restricted cards I'll have at any given point. So like I mentioned, all my first player boxes are all the originals, so there's no printouts here. They're all basic cards. I've sleeved them just so that my sweat doesn't make the cards fade. I use cheap little penny sleeves, so it's nothing great. And that's pretty much it. What I really started this video for was to show you how I make multiplications of cards. So the box layout is pretty much the same. So I have it separated by objective cards, gambit cards, upgrade cards. But now instead of having my main original cards, I have all these custom cards that I made that I printed in black and white to save money. What I want to show you is how to multiply those cards, just in case you're interested in making multiple copies so you can play with friends at home and that your friends don't have to make such a large financial investment, and so that you're not just isolated to playing tournaments with strangers. Now, just before I do that, I just grabbed a random Season 2 box here, and I just want to show you all the box art that I put on it. So this little label on the front is just sort of for fun. So it was during Season 2 that the Arena Mortis rules were released from the White Dwarf magazines. Season 1 had the Chaos Gargant, so I had put a little Chaos Gargant symbol here just for flavor. Aside from that, I just write the player number 2 here and here, and I put a little Night Vault symbol because when I placed in my larger box, I can see it from this angle, and that way it's easy for me to tell if it's a Night Vault Universal card box or if it's Beast Grave or whatever. On the top, I printed a large Universal symbol as well as the Night Vault title here, and I did the same thing for Beastgrave, but I put Beastgrave there, and for Season 1 I put Shadespire. On the back I have the Forbidden and Restricted lists here, which like I said I update regularly. And finally I just have these little icons here to represent the Universal, the Gambit, so the ploy and spells, and the upgrade icons. And I'm going to be posting all of these things in the description below so that you can print them out in case you want to follow a similar format to what I'm doing. I also do something kind of similar for the faction-specific cards. So you can see how it kind of looks different from the Universal card box. I just put a big Shadespire logo on the Season 1 box, but obviously it's Night Vault and Beastgrave for Season 2 and 3. Then I just wrote Season 1 faction-specific. I put Shadespire here because in the box it tends to be placed like this, so it makes it a bit easier for me to find it. Nothing really going on any other side. The only other interesting thing is that, like with my Universal cards, I separate each faction, each warband, by little cardboard strips. But I also printed out the icons for the warbands. So you have Steelhearts, Garrix, Iron Skulls, etc. And it just makes it easy to prepare everything. So let's say I'm making an Iron Skulls Boys deck. Well, I'll just grab my deck out of here, mix it with the Universal cards that I'll get from Season 2 and Season 3, put it together. When it's all done, I can just place them back in their original boxes. So I'll show you how I make the multiple copies of the cards now. It's easy. I'm going to show you the steps that I follow to multiply the cards, and it's not very complicated at all. All you really need are some packs of playing cards. So I buy 2 different colored playing cards from the dollar store near me. They cost $1.25 plus tax Canadian. I get red ones and blue ones, which basically look like this. So these would be the blue ones, basic playing card image on the front, blue back. So red cards are the same idea, basic playing card image on the front, red back. And basically what I do is I use the blue backed cards to represent my power cards and the red backed cards to represent my objective cards. In addition to this, you need to buy some card sleeves. I bought these cheap penny sleeves that are 99 cents per 100. And they're basically just used to hold everything together because I will be gluing the card images onto these playing cards that I just purchased. And without these things to hold them in place, they'll probably detach because everything I'm buying is cheap. The whole purpose is that it's a cheap, inexpensive way of multiplying your cards. You'll need some glue sticks, which I don't have here in front of me. I'm going to have to buy some new ones. And you're going to need your actual card scans. So what I do is whenever Warhammer Underworld comes out with a new expansion, I just take the Universal cards, I scan them on my computer. You can fit 8 per page. So this would be 1 copy of all the scans. You have the ploys, spells, upgrades, objectives, all of those cards. And I do that 3 times. So I basically just have this stack multiplied by 3. So all I do is cut these things out like so. I just spam cut out all the cards per deck, organize them, and then once all of them are cut out, I'll show you all the gluing process. Alright, so I just barely finished cutting out all my stacks. So This is the first one. I have 36 power cards, 18 objective cards, which comes from the 2 new warband sets, which is the Dark Elves and the Orcs, Morgwaiths, and I forget the name of the Orc. But I got 3 sets of those. I got 1, I have 2, and I have 3. Now what I've also done is for each of the card packs, the ones that had a red back, which would be for my universal objective cards, I actually printed out the universal card logo by just scanning 8 of my objective cards on their backside, and then I just printed multiple pages of it out, so it would match the number of new universal cards that got made. And I did the same thing with power cards, as you can see back here. I took the power card logo and glued it onto the back of these blue back power cards. So I have exactly enough to deal with the new cards that I have. All I'm going to do now is glue the fronts onto the front side, and then we'll look at the final product. Alright, so it's been a couple of days. I had to buy some more glue sticks, but I'm ready to finally finish assembling my cards. So these are my objective printouts that I cut out a couple days ago. And right here we have the power card. So if you notice here, these are the power card backed playing cards that I use as a default for all of my copies for the power cards. And all I'm going to do is this. It's the exact same way that I applied this power card label to the back of the cards. All I'm going to do is systematically, with my cheap glue stick, remember everything that I'm doing here is inexpensive, just glue this card image onto the front of the card, and it looks like so. So I'd be a bit careful to make sure that the scans that you make are a little bit bigger than mine. Mine seem to have shrunk a bit, because these are just the cards that are extra copies. I don't care too much how they look like as long as they're readable. And if you look, I print them all in black and white, so it's cheaper, and they are actually very legible, so they work completely well. So this is a completed power card. You have the back, you have the front. I'm going to repeat that for all of these cards. Then I'm going to do the objective cards, and I'm going to repeat it for all 3 sets. So, just to reiterate, very simple. Glue the back of the image to the front of the card. Boom, second card done. And I'm just going to repeat and repeat. It'll probably take me about 25 to 30 minutes. I'll get all of these done, and then I'll show you what the results are. So I finally finished assembling all of my cards. As you can see here, I've made 3 sets of all of the cards, 3 sets of power cards, 3 sets of objective cards, each representing a copy of the latest release from Warhammer Underworlds, which is Morgwaith's Blade Coven and Morgoth's Crushes. So the last thing I'm going to do, well, sort of second to last, is I'm just going to sleeve them. I bought these cheap penny sleeves. They're about $1 for 100. I'm going to systematically go sleeve all of these cards one at a time to help keep them together, because the glue I bought is pretty cheap. These things will fall apart otherwise. So once I'm done sleeving all these things, I'll go on to the next step. Alright, so I finally finished building the cards completely. I've scanned the images, I've printed out the images, I've cut out the images, I've glued the images onto these cards, blue backed for the power cards, red backed for the objective cards, although I did print out the actual backs of the cards to put them on just to make them look a little bit better. I printed everything in black and white. You're obviously welcome to do whatever you'd like. If you want nicer looking cards, you could print in color. I just wanted to save some money. And I've done it 3 times, so I effectively will be able to play 4-player games, 1 from my original set, and then 3 additional copies of the cards to be able to play 4 games overall. So the last thing I'm going to do is put them in their separate boxes. So all I'm going to do now is just take these 3 sets of cards and individually put them into their respective boxes. But I'm going to do one more thing just to prevent me from mixing them up. So what I do is actually even color coding them. So if you look at the top of my boxes, for 2 I put a green dot on the top. For my 3rd player set, I put a black dot on the bottom. And for my 4th player set, I put a red dot on the bottom. The colors really don't matter. What matters is just that they're different from each other. So what I'm going to do for my green cards, for my player 2 cards, is on the back of them, I'm just going to be putting green dots on the top of each of these cards. Boom, that's 1, 2, etc. Until I'm done all of them. And that way, when I do play, if ever my cards get mixed up, I know that the ones with the green dot on the top belong to card box 2 meant for the 2nd player, so that I can always find any missing cards that I have and don't have to worry about reprinting cards or having 2 copies of a card in another box. That would just make it take much longer to actually build decks with all the hunting for the missing cards. Alright, so I finally finished making all the copies of my 2nd, 3rd, and 4th player cards. I just want to show you the end result of what my efforts look like. So if you look at the front, you have these 3 boxes, which are just my faction specific cards. So those are the originals, separated into the Shadespire box, Night Vault box, and Beastgrave box, and I also crammed the Dreadfane warbands in there too, which is why this box is a little bit bigger. Right behind it, you have all the Universal cards. My Shadespire Season 1 cards, my Night Vault Season 2 cards, and my Beastgrave Season 3 cards. And now, in the back, we have all my copies of cards. So all my copies for Player 2, which I put green dots on the top of the cards. All my copies for Player 3, to which I put a black dot on the bottom of the cards. And all my copies of Universal cards for Player 4, where I put a red dot on the bottom. So this basically concludes the video. Like I mentioned before, I'm going to be including PDF files of all the images that I use for the box art and just for the labeling of stuff in the description. And the last point I'll mention is this was a lot of work. If I add the total number of hours I put into making all these copies, probably dozens of hours when I considered 3 copies of Shadespire, 3 copies of Night Vault, and so far the 3 copies of Beastgrave. So what I'd recommend is if you don't want to redo all your old Universal cards, I would just make 3 copies of Universal cards for Beastgrave, because Season 1 Universal cards are already cycled out, and Season 2 Universal cards are about to be cycled out in December. So if you just make 3 copies of the Beastgrave Universal cards, then it becomes fairly easy to maintain. Whenever a new card pack comes out, you'll have maybe 200 cards total to cut and to glue, which really doesn't take that long. And as long as you keep up with the card making as new cards are being released, it's not a lot of work. It's when you let it build up that it gets to become a little bit intimidating. So this concludes my video. This is how I organize and multiply cards. Hope you enjoyed it. If you like videos like these, please comment, please like and subscribe. If you'd like to see more videos of a do-it-yourself nature. I will still be posting videos related to reviewing and balancing for Season 2 starting next week. And I'll also post other videos that are relevant to Warhammer Underworlds as they come to mind. So thanks again for watching and have a nice day.